Alright, so our first piece here is going to be the conical tower and circular wall of Great Zimbabwe. For form, you're going to need to know that these were stone buildings, and for function, this was a city. The walls served as protection, and the circular tower served as a storage area. This goes with power of the patron, and also remember that the city was built on trade. For content, it's a city, so houses, walls, grain silos, stuff like that. And for context, you need to know that Great Zimbabwe was thought to have been built by Europeans because people thought, oh, the Africans could not build this, but then it was actually found out to be African and built by the Shona peoples. Here you have the Great Mosque of Jenne. For those of you who like Forrest Gump, that's easy to remember. For form, remember that it is mud brick or adobe, and the scaffolding sticks out all along the wall, especially on the upper side. This was the city center and also the center of Islamic learning. It has sacred space, but it's also a community space. For content, and also this could go in form, remember the Hippie-style hall, those long columns that are very close together. And for context, remember that this is rebuilt each year in a group effort by the entire community. That is very important, and that allows it to be the oldest mud brick building standing in the world. And this is the wall plaque from Oba's palace. You need to know that this is a cast bronze or metal will suffice sculpture. It is anthropomorphic and stylized with figures on the front. For function, this represents the power of the patron and was meant to be the decoration on the outside of the palace wall. For content, you can put the Oba or king, his attendants, the donkey. Of course, he's wearing that jewelry, the neck rings, and they're holding the fans over top of his head. You also need to remember hierarchical scale, in which the Oba is bigger, larger, taller than the rest of the figures in the picture, making him the most important. For context, this is from Benin. In fact, it's often called the Benin Plaque, which is modern-day Nigeria. This is an Edo people's work, and the way they could afford these kinds of arts is from trade, exemplifying the vast wealth of the patron, again tying back to that power of the patron, which here is the Oba. Up next is the golden stool, or Sika Dwa Kofi. For form, this is a wooden carving with gold overlaid, and it is a seat or chair or throne even. For function, this can serve as power of the patron, but also recognizes death and memory. It seats the ancestors' spirits and is very highly symbolic. Nobody would actually sit on this throne. It symbolizes the presence of all the ancestors of the nation in the room when the stool is present. For content, it is strictly power, the power of those ancestors. And for context here, you need to know that wars were fought over this art object. It is highly important to the Ashanti peoples and also has to do with colonization, because remember, some of those wars were fought by the British, who were trying to take over the Ashanti people's land and their power. So you do need to remember that about this work. And now let me introduce you to our Ndap, the portrait figure of the king. For form, you have oiled wood. This is anthropomorphic and stylized. He would have been wearing feathers on top of that plaque on his head as part of his headdress or crown. For his function, this is power of the patron all the way. But it also has that death and memory because it retains his power after his death. It would house the king's spirit after he had died and provide that power of the king to the other people in the community. These are portraits of individual persons, and this Ndap is one of many. This one is named King Mishe Mishayang, and you need to remember that this is one of a lot of Ndopts. And here we have Nkisi Nkandi, or the power figure. For form, this is a wooden sculpture with metal pieces stuck in, like metal shards or pins or nails. It is anthropomorphic and stylized. For function, you have the power of the patron. This is all about the spirit power. And for content, you can put the power of that spirit, the Nkisi. It also literally contains magnets or stones inside of the stomach behind that enlarged belly button for healing powers. And for context, put that this is ritualistic, shamanic. Only the shaman of the village could utilize it or activate it. And you can put voodoo dolls were inspired by this. But be sure to remember that the power is activated by driving those metal objects into the sculpture. That is what activates that power, making the spirit come alive to avenge any dispute that was ongoing in the community. And here you have the Pwo, or female mask. The female mask is made of wood, raffia, natural materials, and pigment in that gold paint around the eyes. It is anthropomorphic and stylized. For function, this goes with death and memory. It's ritualistic, and it's meant to honor the female ancestors. For content, you can put that calm face, expression of wisdom, expresses how they think women should be in the community. And it also contains the mother goddess spirit. There is a paired mask that is the father god spirit that goes with this, but it's not in the 250. For context, make sure you remember that this is danced by the men to honor all the women of the community, not just one person, but the spirit of the mother or the spirit of your female ancestors as a whole. Don't confuse that with the Mblo mask or the portrait mask. This one is also wood, and it is also anthropomorphic and stylized. The function is the same, death and memory, ritualistic, and to honor ancestors, but this one was made to honor one specific person, possibly while the person was still alive, and was danced in that person's honor. So for the portrait masks, they represent one person, while for the female mask, that represents all women. Next up, you have another mask, the Bundu mask. For this one, it is also wood, even though it looks like metal, because it is oiled and shined over and over again. The things at the bottom are reeds or raffia from the river. It is anthropomorphic and stylized. For function, you can put tradition and change. This is highly ritualistic and part of a female initiation. For content, make sure that you remember that calm face, downcast eyes, small ears and small eyes, and the small mouth, which represents, no gossip, don't speak gossip, don't listen to gossip. Also, you have those fat rolls on the back of the neck, which means that they recognize that their women need to have a little bit of weight on them in order to be good childbearing women, right? And the thing on top is a crown, not her hair. Each one has a different kind of crown, which makes each Bundu mask a little bit different. It's important that you remember the female initiation process, which we talked about, the females from Sierra Leone going through this when they hit their teenage years. Make sure that you put that in there, and that the dance means that they are channeling the river goddess or the river spirit, which is why those reeds come from the river. This was one of your other peer teaches, the Ikenga, or shrine figure. This is carved wood, and it is anthropomorphic and stylized. For function, remember death and memory. but also power of the patron, because these Ikengas would be carved for one specific person to remember their great deeds in life, and they contain items like a sword, a shield, the horns of an antelope, a cup, something like that, to remember those specific events and those specific deeds or great things that the person accomplished during life. And they could have this carved while they were alive, and it would serve as their memory after their death. Next up is the Lukasa, or memory board. For form, you can put, this is a wood base with beads and metal added on top. And for function, this is death and memory. It is a history of the people of the community, and the beads are going to represent the individual people. Remember, the larger bead might represent a more important person, a smaller bead might represent something smaller, obviously. It can only be read by a shaman, so it's a very specialized skill, and it's a visually written record of the community, which is important because a lot of times we think of societies who don't have a form of writing as having no written history, but that's not true, as exemplified by the Lukasa. This is a very important work for you to know. Even though it's abstract, you do need to be able to explain what each part represents. Next up is the Aka elephant mask. For form, you can put that this is made of cloth covered in teeny tiny beads. Remember that it is human-sized, so that elongated trunk would reach all the way to the ground. It is anthropomorphic because it has that human face in the top, and it is distinctly stylized. For function, this represents the power of the patron, and the patron would be the king or important warriors of the community. It was often brought out for celebrations of the king and special ceremonies and paraded through town, but only the important men in the community can dance it, and sometimes the king would join in their festivities while wearing this disguise. You do need to know that this is from the Bamileke peoples of Cameroon, because the Cameroon grasslands influenced the kind of art that they're using and the symbol of the elephant. And here's one of our favorites, the Byeri, or reliquary figure. This is half baby, half adult, which made you love it so much. It's carved out of wood. It is anthropomorphic and stylized yet again. For function, we have death and memory, and it serves to guard the ancestors' bones. Remember that this is one of many Byeri figures, and not all of them are male. Some of them are female. For content, you can put that strong pose, holding their arms together, fist balled, and a calm face with wisdom of the ancestors. And for context, you need to know this is the Fang peoples, and their migratory culture would carry the bones of the ancestors with them. So this is a people that's constantly moving, constantly being uprooted, and so they've created this art based on their migratory life. And last but certainly not least, we have the veranda post. For form, this is wood and pigment, which means it was painted. It is anthropomorphic and stylized. This represents the power of the patron and was part of the palace architecture. Remember, a veranda is like a porch, and the post is something that would be integrated into the design. For content, the smaller figure is the king, and the larger blue figure is his senior wife standing behind him. It's not only the power of the king, but also the power of the wife. For context, you need to remember this is the Yoruba peoples, but more importantly, this was made by an artist called Olowe of Ise, and that is very important to know because he is the number one singled out, the only singled out African artist that we have in this entire content area, which makes him very important. So that's it. Go ahead and get ready for your test, and keep studying, doing those flashcards. I know you're going to do great.